This week, the debate over having a must-have list is reignited as Pam talks about lessons she hopes others will learn from her recent relationship and breakup. And later, is simply being physically present enough, or do we need more from our partner? Welcome to the talking phase. Hello and welcome to the Talking Phase podcast. My name is Tom, and I am joined, as I am every single week, by my beautiful and talented co-host, Pam. How are you,
me.
Pam?
I am doing well, Tom. It's been a pretty good week. We are actually more excited than usual today because after this airs, we are heading to Miami. This has been a big plan in the making. We are going to spend 4 days on South Beach. But the main reason that we're going to Miami is because we were able to somehow get 2 tickets to Taylor Swift. On her first leg back after her long break after Europe, we are going to see Taylor Swift on Sunday. That'll be her last show in Miami. We have seen this concert before. We saw her in Atlanta. We flew to Atlanta in April of 2023. And at that time, we had floor seats. So we were like 7th row center. So she was like right there up in our faces. And there's this thing called Taylor Swift amnesia, where because you're videotaping and it's such a surreal experience, if you're a Swiftie, that you realize after the concert in the next day or two and weeks that you don't really remember it. You have all these pictures and all these videos, but somehow, I don't know whether it's the excitement, I don't know what it was, but you don't have a great memory of the show, just of the feeling of the show. So we've been kind of living in that ever since we saw it. And so now we are going to see it again in Miami. So we fly out later. This time our seats are higher up. They're center stage and higher up. So we didn't see a lot of the production value last time. This time we'll see the whole production value, but we won't get to see Taylor quite as close. And that's okay, because we'll be able to see her again. And we're really excited about it. And on top of that, this is where I grew up. I grew up in Miami. So we knew that once we scored these tickets, it's an opportunity for me to take my daughter. Her name's Nikki. If you guys haven't heard that in the past, she is 30. And she has no recollection of living in South Florida where she was born. And so we are going to take a tour of, all my haunts, high school, and see some of my old friends. So I'm super excited today.
Awesome. That's great. You say you called it, what'd you call it? Taylor Swift amnesia or something like that?
Yeah, I've seen other people call it that too.
I have prime-nesia, which means I order stuff from Amazon and forget.
I have that.
Yeah. So, I'm sitting here realizing just how boring my life must be, or it must appear to anyone outside of my life, because I have no concert tickets. I have no trips to Miami or anywhere else planned right now, except for some business stuff. Obviously I'm going to a couple of places in Tennessee. Got to go back to Utah a couple more times, but I get to see my kids a lot more nowadays because I'm going to Utah so often. So, before we get into anything, though, I forgot, we've got our good friend Brian. What's happening with you, Brian?
Oh, what's happening with Brian? Been up to Salt Lake with you 3 times in the past 6 weeks. Been wild going up there quite a bit. Other than that, let's talk about that, Tom, because that's been my only experience with Salt Lake, right? It has been going on these work trips, but I just feel there's a lot of culture that I'm missing out on
in Salt Lake City. I feel
like there's a lot of Mormon culture. Last time we were there, we raced go-karts for a team activity. That was kind of fun. But as far as culture is concerned, what do you mean, Brian?
The area that is Utah. I mean, you always give me history lessons, right? But I just feel we need to go out and actually experience Utah instead of just staying on the confines of our 4 blocks where we go to our office and then back to the hotel.
Yeah. Well, next time we're up there, let's plan an extra day and we'll borrow somebody's car and actually we'll drive around. I'll show you some of the actual sites.
I'll understand the difference between Shiite and Sunni Mormons.
Right.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked by this whole conversation because every time Tom has talked about Utah to me, it has not been a glowing review of what there is to see or do there.
Well, Utah is dry, it's barren, or it's cold and frozen. It's
Sounds
one
so
of,
fun. I wish I could go with you guys on this tour, this
and
expedition
by the
of
way, I should
Utah.
say Salt Lake, not Utah.
Right.
We should limit this to the Salt
It's
Lake area.
beautiful. It is
Yep.
Utah's a beautiful state.
Yep. Well,
All the Mormons. It's
yes.
beautiful there.
Yeah. And by the way, Brad and I, my boss and I looked it up the other day. Only 42% of Utah is Mormon now, which is kind of crazy considering.
I think
But anyway, with
religion
all that,
just fading.
yeah. Pam, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, clearly, you know, Tom, that last week I mentioned that my long distance relationship had come to an end.
Yeah.
It was still a little bit raw, working through what did we do wrong? Could this have been fixed? But after giving it some thought, I have realized that my decisions really over the past 5 years or so since my divorce have all been kind of more than a little bit flawed.
Hmm.
Yeah, instead of safeguarding what I've done wrong, I think that sharing some of it might be helpful to people that listen to our show. Maybe some of the mistakes that I've made and continue to make could benefit somebody and get ahead of a problem. I don't expect people to change their decisions based on mine. But yeah, I thought today we might discuss just repeating habits that we have failed to break, or things that we thought we had broken. You always say, this time I'm going to be different. I'm going to pick somebody different. I'm going to go to different places. I'm not going to use a dating app. I'm going to meet organically, and that's going to fix everything. And then you meet somebody and you just ignore red flags because what have you really learned? That seems to
Right.
be a really good question or topic for
Yeah.
today.
No, I like it. And I'm glad that you're willing to talk about it. Obviously, that, at least for me, it always helps to talk through things, and we have a platform, so why not, right?
Yeah, no,
Um,
I've always been an open book on the show, and I don't think that should stop it. I mean, I talked about the relationship, and so yeah, I think I should talk about the breakup and maybe some other, you know, things that I have done or mistakes that I have made. So hold on to your hats. Probably not that bad.
before you get into it too far, I actually saw a TikTok yesterday or the day before, where some lady, she was a guest on some podcast, or at least she was sitting there with a microphone in her face, and um, she said, the difference between men and women, after a relationship, a woman will tear herself down and completely rebuild everything about her life to prepare for her next relationship, where men will just go on and do the exact same thing over and over again. And I'm not sure I
Ah,
agree with that. Again, I never agree with anything that is completely 100% gender specific. I think that's ridiculous. Um, but as a general rule, I'm not even sure I agree with that. Do you?
yeah,
What do you think?
I find that fascinating. I don't know what men do as a rule. I know that personally, when I have a bad relationship or a relationship that doesn't work out, um, I can see my part a lot of the time. In my most recent relationship, I blame it mostly on the long distance. I think that it is very hard to make a relationship spicy a couple days a month. I think it's really hard to maintain that feeling of excitement long distance. But it's possible that it wasn't there from the beginning. When you're entering into a relationship, I think that you generally have rose colored glasses on, and I think that when you're exiting a relationship, you see a lot more clearly all of the negatives that you have been ignoring. In my last relationship, I didn't ignore red flags. Um, I actually, every time something happened that I couldn't come to terms with or figure out or decide whether it was something that I could handle, I wrote it all down. And I generally shared all of the things on those lists with him, just to let him know that these were things that I was having doubts in. And we would discuss it and generally work through it and then just move forward. And I would then discard that concern or that worry. But we are who we are. And at the end of the day, just because you are able to discuss something that maybe you don't like doesn't mean that you should ignore it and just go along with it. I mean, so yeah, I think that I am still ignoring red flags. But after the relationship, to answer your question, no, I don't tear myself down. I question, what my part was in the relationship. It takes two to tango. But when it's time to date again, when it's time to go out there and meet somebody, I'm going to be the exact same person while I was dating him. Because if there's one thing I know about that relationship, it's that I did my 100% best in a long distance relationship that I have no experience with. I
Right.
did my best to be what I consider the best girlfriend that I could be. I showed up. Yeah, I struggled mostly when this ended with the fact that I couldn't think of anything that I could have done differently.
Mm.
And that's a first because usually, you're fighting about things. So I think I just came to realize that if it wasn't long distance, it was just different personalities. And in order for me to to break myself down for the next guy, I'd have to change my personality. And I can't do that. So whoever gets me next is going to get the exact same person that he got. And hopefully that person will really, really appreciate it.
Well, I think that's the right way to look at it because, I think too many people put on a facade or an act, especially at the beginning of a relationship, and and then then you learn 3 months in, it's like, well, wait a minute, who the hell are you? This isn't who I met 3 months ago or who I fell in love with
Right.
or whatever. So it's
Right.
awesome.
Well, I mean, and sometimes you guys, you are just who you are and they are who they are. And you want the relationship so much that having a good conversation about something that really bothers you is enough to just sweep it under the rug. And that's where I have been most guilty probably in my life, even going into my marriage. There were a ton of red flags there too. And I just swept them under the rug because I really liked him as a person and felt like I can get past all of these things. And we made it, 17, 18 years. But those very things from the beginning are probably the same reasons why we got divorced in the end. And
Interesting.
in this relationship, those things that I swept under the rug or had conversations with are the reasons that when this relationship ended, I didn't cry because I knew that we were better off not in a relationship. And maybe someday we'll be friends. I mean, I hope so, because I think that we have more in common as friends than we did in a relationship. But that's literally just one of my relationship experiences where I have now reflected on and said, damn, I got older and I didn't get wiser. Like, isn't that what's supposed to happen? You get older and wiser. How am I just getting older and I'm not getting any wiser? Why am I making the same mistakes?
That's interesting because when, we've talked about it on this show where and I've made a couple of TikToks about it, that a few years ago I got dumped in a very spectacular way. Um, that, it kind of blew me apart. I mean, it was as hurtful as my divorce had been, if not more so, because by the time my divorce came around, that was her second time cheating and all that kind of stuff. There had already been quite a bit of mourning. Well, in this particular case, there was no warning, there was no lead up to it. It just happened, and I was like, "What the hell?" And because again, just 24 hours earlier, we'd been talking about marriage and all sorts of stuff, and so it really did
Hmm.
come out of the blue for me. And I was talking to my therapist, and he said, why don't you write down a list? This is the homework he gave me. He said, write down a list of every single thing you have learned, positive and negative, from that relationship, from the beginning to the very end, to this moment. What are the things that you've learned? And it was cathartic, if nothing else. I mean, it really did. And at the moment, I was thinking pretty negatively, but there was a lot of positive in that relationship, up until the very, very end. But what's funny is you guys have all heard about the list that we've talked about ad nauseum.
Yeah.
that list of lessons that I learned later became the foundation for my list of deal breakers and must haves. And so, you mentioned that you're not learning, but you've also said that, you've said you're writing off long distance relationships forever. So it sounds like you've at least learned one thing. So my question now is, do you have a list?
Oh,
And what's on it?
my answer is the same as it was during that episode. No, I do not have a list. I do not believe in lists. I have things that I like or dislike. The only thing that was on my list when we had that episode was long distance relationships. That was like, I mean, there were other things like very fluid things. He has to be nice. He has to have a good sense of humor. I mean, we all have, we want to be with good people. That kind of goes without saying. So we all have, some idea of what we're looking for. I don't have a list because if I put something on a list, even long distance relationship, and I meet somebody out organically and I have this mad chemistry with this human being and he lives in another state or he lives a couple hours away. While we record this podcast, it occurs to me that I cannot say never. I cannot say I would never go into a long distance relationship again. I thought I checked all my long distance relationship boxes. Like I knew that he was willing to relocate. I knew that we had the same time frame for relocating. I was listening to you tell your story just now about that relationship and how you were, shocked by what happened. I think that I probably would have stayed in this relationship longer, even though things weren't perfect, even though there were red flags and conversations that left me feeling a little icky. Yeah, I think I would have stayed in it anyway. But unfortunately, I hate to admit that I would have stayed in it not because we would have been a great couple, and maybe we would have been. I'll never know. But I think I would have stayed in it just because I really, really hate dating so much.
Yeah.
I think it's falling very hard into the devil category, which then falls into the topic of, am I getting wiser? Like if I would have stayed in a relationship with somebody that other people who met him maybe saw things that I didn't see, and I was very defensive and I thought he was just the greatest guy, and maybe there's another side. Maybe I didn't want to see the things that would have meant I had to end that relationship because I really, really liked him and he fit well into my world. And therefore I was willing to keep those rose-colored glasses on. And would it have been a successful relationship? I think for me to know that, we would have had to live in the same city. So I'm not taking long distance relationships completely off my list, but I'm not adding it to my list, but I definitely think that I would prefer to meet somebody locally and spend a lot more time with them quicker so that you can tell whether it's a good fit. Because yeah, you don't want to invest 6 months to a year in somebody and then find out that it's just not going to work out. And so that's really only one situation. I mean, I wish I could say that dating long distance after saying I wouldn't was, the only time I broke a cardinal rule. I mean, I have dated men that are much younger than me. And
How much younger?
that's not almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, that's not good.
That's like dating Brian.
Well, he's older than Brian, at least. But yeah, I mean, I didn't let it get too serious. I did cut it off before that happened, but I was open to it for a minute. Why? I knew better. I've even dated people who were friends, that were good friends, that I knew that, I knew a lot about them. I knew that there wasn't a huge amount of romantic interest, but you know what? They were great people. And so I was willing to date and to find out whether it could be more. I just find that at 57, I am still fluid. I am still making the same mistakes. in the hopes that somebody I choose to date that chooses me won't be a mistake, that they'll be my person moving forward.
That's interesting. And you know what? Hats off to you for sticking to your guns. And it goes back to what you and I have talked about on this show a dozen times or more, which is, what is it? Donnie and Marie used to sing, "I'm a little bit country and you're a little bit rock and roll," or whatever it is. And
Right.
I'm black and white and you're just gray.
Yeah. And,
Um,
I do believe that opposites attract, but I don't think that they should date. And they definitely shouldn't get married because, you know, if you wind up in a relationship that's like our podcast, you and I see, a lot of things very, very differently. And,
yep.
and that's because we have a podcast. You don't want that in a relationship. So I think that, if I could give somebody advice or give myself advice, it would be to date people who see things the way that you do, who are flexible in the areas that are willing to compromise. I don't want to ever date somebody with a list. I feel like the women that you date have a really high bar to pass, and that's great because that's your expectations for yourself.
hmm Yeah. Interesting. Again, I'm sorry that it didn't work out. I'm sorry you're having to go back out on that dating journey. But you're awesome. So you'll find the right guy.
Oh, and I was happily single before this relationship, and I will be happily single again. I think that a relationship is something that, if and when it happens, it's going to make my life better than it already is. And that's the goal. So I guess my question to you is: do you think that we're ever old enough to not repeat the same mistakes just because we feel those stupid butterflies? Um, do you ever think that you would ignore logic or your list if you just met somebody and they just obviously, like that show that we talked about last week on our episode, if you met somebody that was not a perfect fit for you, they didn't check your boxes, but you felt passion and excitement, what would Tom do?
Well, I hope that I would follow my list. I mean, it's there for a reason. Um, and it's there to protect me. And quite frankly, it's to protect her as well. I mean, it's my list, but at the same time, if she doesn't check all my boxes, chances are I don't check all hers, whether she writes them down or not. Um, and so it just, I like to think that I would follow my list. I guess that's my answer. I think I would follow my list. I hope I would.
And and then what happens when you meet somebody that does check all of your boxes? Is that a guaranteed home run?
No, well, there are no guarantees in life. And remember, the most important one is the last one. And we didn't ever go through the list ad nauseum, like one for one on this show. We did it on TikTok, or I
Right.
did it on TikTok. And so, there are a lot of things about there, about smoking and drugs and drinking. And, there's a
Sex.
lot of those kind of things that are like clear check marks. But the final one is the most important one. It's chemistry.
Right.
If every one of the boxes is checked all the way down to number 26, but number 26 can't be checked, then the rest of them don't matter.
Right. No.
Well, in fact, none of them matter. If they're not all checked, none of them are checked. That's
No.
the way the list works. It's not
Yeah.
you do 2/3 of the list and you're good. It's 100% or none.
That's a
Um,
lot. I think, for me, my list kind of goes in the opposite direction because, I have to feel chemistry with somebody in the first place. And, I saw a video and I sent it to you and I loved it. Um, that woman's name? She's an expert on relationships. She has an accent.
Brene, uh, I was going to say Brene Brown. Uh,
No, but I wish I could remember her name. All right. Well, we'll get it to you if we can think of it. But anyway,
yeah.
I sent you that video where she said that people go into a date or dating and they expect to feel chemistry while they're sitting across the table from somebody the first time on a date. They expect to feel the butterflies and the magic. And she said, it's ridiculous. You're not going to feel that on a first date, or a second or a third, you may find that that person's really attractive and you have things in common. But in order to feel that chemistry and those butterflies, you have to be engaging in an activity. You have to be doing something with that person that you can see them and be like, holy cow, I love the way he holds a cue stick when we're playing pool. Or I love the fact that he has this outfit on, or the way that he looks at me. Like, those things are things that happen over time. They take time to grow. And a lot of people are expecting them on a first, second, or third date, where you're really just getting to know somebody and putting so much pressure on yourself that if you don't feel that magic after a first date, or in your case, in the first 10 minutes of a date, that maybe there's no second date. And in that case, I feel like you're biting off your nose to spite your face, because if you're not open to getting to know somebody, 1 date, 2 dates, 3 dates, how do you know if there's going to be chemistry?
Well, and I think that so there are two types of chemistry. There's good chemistry and bad chemistry. And so for me, I know that if there's going to be bad chemistry, like this person just bugs the shit out of me,
Right.
I'm going to know that pretty quick. That's when
Yeah.
we talk about chemistry in the first 10 or 20 minutes. If it's neutral or great chemistry, then you can move on to the next date if you want. But anyway, that's the way I see it.
Well,
So,
I mean, I watched that video multiple times, and it did make me think that, as I start to date again, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. That I'm more open to getting to know somebody to see if it's going to work out. I
mhm,
don't decide in the first 10 minutes, and sometimes I don't decide on the first date. Unless I'm appalled, if it's somebody that it's just absolutely a hell no, then I'm
right.
not going to go out with them again. But if there's any question, I'm not going to base it on chemistry or butterflies or that pit you get in your stomach. I'm going to wait till I get to really know somebody, because chemistry comes and goes. I mean, you can feel it and then it's gone, or you can not feel it in the beginning and then it grows. So I think it takes a little bit longer to know.
I don't disagree with that, actually, believe it or not.
And I
Um,
definitely think I need to take my rose-colored glasses off. I mean, I don't have a list, and I'll never have a list, but I know when I'm doing something that goes against my grain. And sometimes I do it anyway. And
that's called a
sometimes,
list, Pam.
yeah, I'm not going to do that. I believe that a person is three-dimensional. Somebody can check off all your boxes and still not be your person. Somebody can be your person and not check off all those boxes. You can compromise, you can learn, you can lean. Not everything is black and white. And so I'm not going to eliminate anybody who might make my life better. It might be fantastic just because they don't check all my boxes, because I don't have any boxes. So it's just how I feel in my heart. And
Okay.
yes, that leads to mistakes, but you know what? I'm getting older. I'm just not getting wiser.
Okay. Well, I disagree. I mean, you are getting older. We're all getting older, but you're also getting wiser, whether you want to admit it or not.
No,
So,
I'm kind of kidding around when I say that. I just do keep my biggest flaw is staying in a relationship or dating somebody past the point where I know that there are problems that are insurmountable. I know that it's not going to work out, and yet I hold on to hope that it still can work out.
yeah.
And sometimes you need to listen to your head and not your heart.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, I'll tell you what, I think that, again, thanks for sharing your situation. I know it's not easy, but hopefully someone out there heard it and thought, you know what, Pam's right.
Oh,
She's awesome.
she
So
really is dumb. They're going to be saying she's right. She really
no,
is not getting wiser. She fucked up
no, no,
again.
no.
Anyway, I'm sure that as we go on, I will talk more about my past experiences and my present experiences. And, if one person can learn from my mistakes, even if it's not me, then I have benefited somebody.
There you go. Perfect. So before we go on to our next segment, take a minute, everybody, if you can, just pause the podcast right now. Just take 2 seconds, rate and review us on whatever app you're hearing us on, or whatever YouTube or whatever. If you're watching this, take a second, write a couple of words in the review section as well. Don't just give us 5 stars. Please give us 5 stars. But also, it really helps if you actually write a couple of words. So, hey, how do you learn from past relationships? Throw that in there. That would be very helpful. So with that, I think it's time to move on to our next segment.
You've got mail.
Our next segment has arrived. All right, here we go. Dear Tom and Pam, my husband, my childhood sweetheart, is my soulmate. If there is
Oh,
anything. Oh, I love the word soulmate. You don't like that?
no, I was like, oh.
Oh, okay, good. It was a good oh. Within about 2 years, I realized that my husband never says I love you unless
Mhm.
it's in response to my having said it first, and sometimes not even then. He has never been very touchy or warm, so if we're not having sex or I'm not offering to rub his back, nothing intimate happens except excellent conversation from time to time, which I am not willing to give up. In
Hmm.
the end, good conversation will be one of the last connections we'll have to one another. These conversations from time to time about how I wish that he would romance me once in a while, give me a compliment, a kiss on the cheek, unprompted, a pat on the ass, make him feel bad about himself. He has told me this. He says a part of our issues are due to my making him feel bad about himself so often. I
Oh.
say, I wish you'd tell me you love me. He says, I wish that you knew that I did. He doesn't want to say it to reassure me. He thinks I should know. I ask how I should know, and he looks so hurt and says, because I am here. Is he right that I should be satisfied that he loves me because he continues to stay in our relationship? That this should be sufficient proof. Thanks for your help. Are actions louder than words? Holy cow.
Wow.
Holy cow. Well, if that's not heartbreaking, I'm not sure
Oh,
what is.
I, uh, wow. I just feel so bad. I mean, the love language thing. This is our second week in a row where it's about love language, really, because this reminds me about 25 years ago, I was at church. That's when I used to go to church. And we were in this men's group, and the lesson that was being taught was on how to be a good husband. And this guy said, hey, guys, they called him brethren, but hey, brethren, um, when was the last time you told your wife that you loved her? Now, as a words of affirmation person, I say it all the time. I tell my partner I love her. Um, if I love her, of course. Anyway, but some old guy, I mean, he had to be 75 or 80 years old in the group. He raises his hand. He goes, on my wedding day, I told my wife that I love her and I'd let her know if that ever changed. And he thought that was the funniest thing. And again, it's a joke and everything, but I just thought, but he's probably partially serious. And it sounds like this dude here, what did she sign it? Our actions louder than words.
Yeah.
Her husband, he's kind of that same way. It's like, why should I have to tell you? I told you once or whenever. And he says, I wish you knew I did love her. No, he doesn't.
Well, don't say you mean he doesn't love her.
No, no, no. He says, I wish you knew I did. He doesn't wish
Right.
she knew because all she's asking is for him to say it. Why is that hard?
No, I see your point 100%. I I at first immediately felt like this is a total him problem. Um, she shouldn't have to wish to hear this, blah, 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 blah. And then I kind of really sat with it for a while. And I thought about the fact that something must have happened to this man to make it so hard for him to verbalize the words I love you. I mean, from everything that she wrote, I felt like he loved her. I really felt it. I felt like he really wanted her to know just because they have a great relationship, just because of his actions. Um, Something happened in his youth or something happened to really make it impossible for him to say those three words. And that makes me more sad than anything because for me, telling somebody that I love them has always been so easy. If I love somebody, I tell them I love them all the time. And I would struggle like she does without hearing I love you. Clearly they've had many discussions about this. It's a long-term relationship. So yeah, I think it's hard. It's hard, but I do question any advice that would be along the lines of, well, you should end a marriage that is amazing because you're not getting the words of affirmation that you need because I don't know, sometimes that is sacrifice. And we talked about sacrifice in our last episode. Sometimes the sacrifice, unfortunately, is having to go without something that you really want because everything else is what you really want.
You know, I I agree and I disagree, and I'll tell you why. Because I could completely feel this lady's pain because um, from everything we know, again, I know we can sit here and invent all sorts of childhood trauma that he may have had and stuff like that, but we don't know. So from what we do know, um, he's not on the surface making effort to speak her love language. Um, again, we don't know all this stuff, but from what we know, it appears that he's not making any effort to speak her love language. And obviously, she's a words of affirmation person. That she needs those words to feel loved. To know that that he loves her, he needs to tell her. Um, and I don't know what his love language is. You know, she didn't give us any information whatsoever about his love language. And I will tell you the reason I feel this so deeply is because my ex-wife Trinity, she fits the exact same description of this guy. What did she say? He's not very touchy feely. I can't remember how she said it.
I don't. Let me go back up really quick and see what she said.
He has never been touchy or warm. Okay,
right.
So that totally describes my ex-wife. She's not touchy or warm.
Right.
I'm not going to say she's cold-hearted or anything. She's just not a touchy, feely, warm person. And so she understood that my love language is words of affirmation, and that for me to feel loved, she would try and she would remind herself. She literally would set timers for herself to remind herself that Tom needs this word or these words of affirmation. And I always appreciated that. But the thing is as our marriage came to an end for those last couple of years, I started to notice that instead of her saying, I love you, I heard a lot of ditto, meaning I would tell her that I love her and she would just say ditto.
Well, that had to be really hard.
Well, at first it was like, oh, at least she's saying ditto.
Oh, ew.
Right. But when she when she's saying, I wish you'd tell me you love me, that's exactly what when I would tell her that I loved her, that was me saying, I really wish you would tell me that you love me.
Oh,
and
that's
so
really hard.
Yeah. So when I read this email, I just sat there going, oh, this poor woman, because I lived through this. And so I'm going to cut to the chase on my side of it. And I think you'll have a lot more thinking or thoughts about this, but I believe this is the first email we've received that my first inclination is not to say, oh, just have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
These people need some serious counseling. And I'm not going to say they need to get divorced. I'm not saying that. I'm saying they need some counseling because her husband needs to understand how important it is for her to hear those words. Or she does not understand or doesn't feel that you love her. Those words are not irrelevant. They're not just throwaway words. They're important. So anyway, those are my thoughts. What do you think?
Well, I think that therapy would definitely benefit them. I think that, let's assume that they go to therapy, and let's just say that this is something for him that he can't get past. I asked myself it's one thing to not be able to say, I love you. When she makes comments that, we've kind of now combined words of affirmation with physical touch. If he's not capable of physical touch or words of affirmation, I'm not sure what he's doing that he thinks should be enough. Just saying, I'm here,
right,
being there. I mean, that's also a love language, just being there. What's that one, Tom?
Quality time.
Quality time. I love quality time, but quality time would never be enough for me in any relationship.
No way.
So, her needs aren't being met. In this particular situation, if therapy doesn't work out and he can't show her or tell her that he loves her, she just needs to take a really long, hard look at that marriage and decide, is this enough? I mean, it It's not about a conversation. It's not even about therapy, although I hope they go and I hope it helps. It's about, at the end of the day, is what he's giving her enough to be okay or happy for the rest of her life? And you know what? I'm not here to say that being okay isn't enough. We have talked enough about dating and what it's like starting over, that if she's in a marriage that is mostly satisfying to her, they spend a lot of time together, they enjoy the same things. If she feels joy and happiness in spite of not hearing I love you and not having physical touch, if they somehow have a great sex life and they really connect intimately, and there's a lot of other things that are really going for them, then I personally would probably stay in that relationship. But on that same note, I would not have entered into a relationship with somebody who was not capable of both physical touch and words of affirmation. So she's already in it now. I think it comes down to what is most important for her.
Right. And she does not say, I'm just looking at it again, it's her childhood sweetheart. I mean, they've been together since, I don't know if they were together the entire time that they were together, or that they've been growing up.
I don't know. They listen to our podcast. So I just automatically assumed that they were at least 30s and 40s.
I agree. But so she says, within about 2 years, I realized my husband never says I love you. So it's clearly they've been married for at least 2 years. But again, like you said, it's probably more. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I hope whatever, how'd she sign it? Our actions louder than words. Hey, actions louder than words.
Are you asking me?
Nope. Have a conversation and
Oh.
get some therapy, do some counseling. And like you just said, Pam, she's got to weigh it all out there.
Yeah.
If for whatever reason his brain simply cannot say the words "I love you" to his wife, I don't understand how that could even be a thing. But if somehow he's been, programmed that he can't say those words.
I was a little curious how it took 2 years. Like, did he start out with physical touch and saying I love you and now he stopped? Right. I mean, that's a whole different scenario. Then there's a much bigger problem. If he's never done it and she married him anyway, something was right enough, or she was like me and she had rose-colored glasses on and just thought this is going to work itself out. At the end of the day, I think it comes down to, would you divorce someone who you had a wonderful marriage with for not saying I love you or not being able to pat you on the butt? I don't know. I don't think I'd be happy for the rest of my life without those things, but I can certainly not answer for her.
Right. Yep, exactly. That's why I say, get some counseling, get some therapy.
And if not, have a conversation. And at the end of all of that, figure out what you can live with and what you can't live with, and go from there.
Absolutely. I agree.
And let us know. Let us know what you decide. You knew we were reading your email today. Please let us know what you decide. I feel a little invested in this. I would like to know, whether it somehow resolved, although it sounds like a tough one.
Yeah, I feel you, sister.
So with that said, thank you so much for your emails. We love them. I love reading them, even when they're a little bit sad. Hopefully we can help. Clearly, Tom and I don't have a lot of experience with this situation or with every situation, but we sure have a lot of experience with most situations at our age. So send them on in, talkingphase@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. I promise to read all of the emails and let you know if or when we're going to read it on the show.
Outstanding. Pam, as we come to a close here, I'm going to say one more time to everybody out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of the Talking Phase family that grows every single week. It's very exciting to see the growth numbers. It's always fun. So please, the way that you can help us grow this family a little bit even bigger is to rate us. If you haven't done so already, please give us 5 stars on whatever app you're using to listen to us. Give us a quick review too. Not just a 5-star. We do want the 5 stars, but if you can write a few words, it always actually moves us up the ladder even higher. Just answer the question. Should your husband or wife actually try to learn your love language? How important are love languages? And should you just be okay understanding that they love you because they haven't divorced you yet?
Oh, goodness gracious.
I know. But
Bare minimum. Give us
Yeah,
the bare minimum.
that's the
I
bare
think that's how we
minimum.
started
But is
this
that
podcast.
enough?
Just
Is
give me
that
the
enough?
bare minimum. I'll put on my rose-colored glasses. We'll have
There
a good
you
time.
go. But be sure to share this podcast with your friends and your family if you think they'd enjoy it. We drop a new episode every single Friday morning. Be sure to follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Pam does an amazing job keeping those updated. And until next Friday, this is Pam and Tom signing off.
Yay. Have a great day, week. I'm off to see Taylor Swift. Have a great night. Here.